I've always believed in making my own way, so living solo in this bustling city, just a stone's throw from where I work as an editor at a large book publishing, has been perfect for me. My folks, bless them, are just a phone call away, but here in the city, it's all on me. This one Saturday, needing a break from the usual, I decided to swap out manuscripts for some fresh air and headed to the nearby park. It's my go-to spot for some quiet, usually. I was lost in thought, maybe more than I should have been, because I didn't see the bike path up ahead. "Watch out." That was the first thing he said to me. I jumped back, just in time as this guy on a bicycle screeched to a halt right where I would have been a second later. "Jesus, lady, you trying to get yourself killed?" he snapped, catching his breath. He was clearly annoyed but also seemed relieved that he hadn't hit me. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking. Are you okay?" I stammered, feeling like a complete fool. "Yeah, I'm fine. No thanks to you, though. You gotta watch where you're going." His tone was harsh, but his concern seemed genuine. I know. I just zoned out. "Thanks for stopping in time," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up. He ran a hand through his hair, looking a bit calmer. "Alright, no harm done, I guess. But maybe keep off the bike lane, huh?" "Deal," I said, managing a small smile. "I'm Jenna, by the way." "Tom," he said, offering a hand, which I shook. "So, Jenna, always this distracted, or is it just my lucky day?" "Only on Saturdays," I quipped back, feeling a bit more at ease. We both laughed, and somehow, that awkward start turned into coffee at the nearby cafe. Turns out, Tom worked at a car sales company. He was straightforward, kind of blunt, but funny. We talked about everything, from books, which he admitted he didn't read much of, to cars, which I knew nothing about. It was easy, simple conversation, the kind where you suddenly realize hours have passed. "Didn't think I'd end up spending my afternoon with the woman who almost wrecked my bike," Tom said as we stood up to leave. "And I didn't think I'd be thanking the same guy who called me a killer on our first chat," I shot back, laughing. "Well, guess we're both full of surprises. Can I see you again, Jenna? Maybe on a day when you're not in the path of moving vehicles?" I nodded, smiling. "I think I can arrange that." Over the next few weeks, Tom and I started seeing each other more often. At first, it was just casual coffee dates and walks through different parts of the city. He had a rough way of talking, but it grew on me, felt real and down to earth. Before I knew it, these friendly meetups turned into late-night talks, dinners at places that became our spots, and slow, revealing conversations about our lives. There was something about Tom that felt familiar and exciting at the same time. I was drawn to his blunt charm, and from those ordinary meetings, an affair began. The more things progressed with Tom, the more inevitable it became that I'd meet his folks. They lived in the suburbs, a nice big house with a yard and all. Tom had warned me his mom was a bit traditional, but I wasn't prepared for just how much. We pulled up to their house, and right from the start, it was clear his parents had been eagerly waiting for us. His mom, a robust lady with a warm smile, welcomed us at the door, enveloping Tom in a big hug and giving me a once-over that felt a bit too long. "Jenna, dear, it's so nice to finally meet you. Tom has told us so much about you," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt more like she was trying to figure out my dress size than welcome me. "Thanks, Mrs. Harper, it's great to meet you too," I replied, trying to match her warmth. We sat down in the living room, and Mrs. Harper wasted no time diving into the conversation. "So, Jenna, Tom tells us you work at a publishing house. That must be exciting, handling books all day." "It is, Mrs. Harper. I love my job. It's fulfilling to be part of the creative process," I said, glancing at Tom, hoping he'd help steer the conversation. "That's nice, dear. But you know, once you two settle down, you'll need to think about what's really important. Family should come first, and a woman's touch in the home is irreplaceable," she said, not missing a beat. Tom's dad, who had been quietly observing the exchange, chimed in with a nod. "Absolutely. A stable home is the foundation of a good life. Right, son?" Tom shifted uncomfortably but managed a nod. Yeah, Mom, Jenna's really great at managing her time though. She's pretty organized and sharp. Well, of course, but managing a home is different, you know. It's a full-time commitment, his mom countered, fixing her gaze on me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. I cleared my throat, feeling the need to defend my position. I believe it's possible to balance both, Mrs. Harper. I think a modern family can have two working parents. It's all about teamwork, isn't it? Mrs. Harper smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, dear, that's a nice thought. But in reality, children need their mother. And a house needs a woman's touch, not just a quick sweep. The conversation drifted to other things, but the seed had been planted. Dinner was served, and it was like sitting in a minefield. Every compliment about the food felt like a veiled suggestion for me to take notes. Jenna, do you cook often? Mrs. Harper asked as she served a perfectly roasted chicken. Sometimes, when I can. Work keeps me pretty busy, I replied, trying to keep it light. Ah, well, you'll find great satisfaction in keeping your family fed and your house in order. There's a rhythm to it that's quite fulfilling, she explained, passing the mashed potatoes like she was handing down wisdom. Tom kicked me under the table lightly, a silent signal to not get riled up. I just smiled, sipping my wine a bit more than usual, thinking about how this dinner was more an interview than a meal. Tom and I decided to tie the knot after a year of dating. Despite the reservations I had from meeting his parents, love, as they say, makes you hopeful. We planned a modest wedding, just close family and friends, nothing fancy, just how we both wanted it, or so I thought. The wedding day was a blur of smiles, flowers, and a small crowd of well-wishers at a local community hall we'd booked. It was quaint, draped in simple decorations, and there was an air of excitement, or maybe that was just my nerves. The ceremony was short and sweet. We exchanged vows, rings, and a kiss that sealed the deal. Everyone clapped, and it felt right, at that moment at least. At the reception, while we were munching on finger food, Tom leaned over and said, "So, I was thinking about our next steps, about moving into a bigger place." I nodded, munching on a celery stick. Sure, we talked about needing more space. What did you find? There's this great apartment, bigger and really nice. It's actually near where I grew up, he added, watching my reaction closely. Near your parents? I asked, trying not to sound too concerned. Yeah, it's convenient, and Mom and Dad would be thrilled to have us close by. Plus, Dad mentioned he could help us out with the rent for a bit. I paused, thinking about the constant visits from his mom I'd have to endure. That's generous. But, Tom, you know how I value our independence. I don't want to feel like we're not on our own. Tom squeezed my hand. I get it, Jenna, but think about it. It's a good financial move, and it'll be nice to have family nearby, you know, for when we decide to start our own. I wasn't convinced, but decided to give it a shot. Okay, we can try it. But if it feels too crowded, we need to reconsider, alright? Deal. Tom smiled, and we went back to entertaining our guests. Moving in was a hassle. The apartment was indeed spacious and had a lovely view of a nearby park, but it was also a 40-minute drive from my work, which added to my daily commute. Tom's parents, true to form, were over often. His mom came by with housewarming gifts, which were really just ways to imprint her taste on our decor. Jenna, dear, I brought you some nice curtains, much better than those drab ones you picked out, she said one afternoon, holding up a garish set of floral curtains. Thanks, Mrs. Harper, but I actually like the ones we have. I tried to keep my tone light. Oh, but these will brighten up the living room so much more, she insisted, already walking over to change them. The tension was palpable each time she visited, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Tom did his best to mediate, but it was clear that his idea of close to family and mine were worlds apart. Over time, the topic of how we should live our lives began cropping up more frequently. Tom increasingly expressed his preference for traditional family roles. Jen, think about it. You managing the home, me bringing in the cash, it just makes sense, he'd argue, his voice firm as if that settled the matter. But look at this, I'd respond, pulling up our budget on my laptop. 2 incomes, especially now with everything that's going on, pandemics, economic dips, it just makes more sense. We're more secure this way. Tom would shake his head, clearly frustrated. That's not how a family should work. It's not just about money, Jenna. But it is about stability, Tom. And us both working doesn't mean we can't have a great home life. I tried to reason, but it felt like talking to a wall. Meanwhile, Mrs. Harper practically turned our apartment into her second home. She was over all the time, and every visit felt like an inspection. Jenna, you're not thinking of staying in that job forever, are you? She'd start as soon as she walked in. I'd barely have my coat off, and there she was, questioning my life choices. I actually enjoy my work, Mrs. Harper. It's important to me, I'd say, trying to keep my voice steady and polite. She'd tisk and start prowling around the apartment, her fingers sliding over surfaces, looking for dust. Well, if you were home more, maybe this place would be cleaner, she'd say, holding up her dusty finger like it was evidence in a trial. It's clean enough. We live here, it's not a museum, I'd shoot back, feeling my patience thinning. But she'd already be on to her next inspection point, flinging open the refrigerator to critique my grocery choices. This isn't enough food for a healthy meal. And look at these leftovers, don't you cook fresh? She'd complain, her nose wrinkling in disapproval. I tried talking to Tom about it. Your mom is overstepping, and it's stressing me out. I can't keep up with her expectations. Tom, ever the peacemaker, would sigh. She's just trying to help, Jenna. Maybe if you were home more, things wouldn't be so tense. One evening, after a particularly hard day at work, I came home to find Tom in a foul mood. This place is a mess, Jenna. And dinner's it's not up to par, he said, poking disdainfully at the pasta I had whipped up. I'm doing my best, Tom. I'm working full-time and trying to keep up with the house. But it's never good enough for you, or your mom, I snapped, frustration boiling over. Well, maybe if you weren't trying to do both, you'd actually do one right, he shot back, his words sharp and cutting. I was taken aback. Are you saying I need to choose between my job and our home? If you can't handle both, then yes. Maybe you should just be a housewife. Honestly, if things don't change, I don't see how this can work out, he threatened, his tone cold and serious. I felt a chill run down my spine. The man I loved was giving me an ultimatum that felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Be a housewife or bust. It was clear that the life I had built, my career, my independence, was slipping through my fingers the more I tried to cling to it. The tension in our home was thick enough to cut with a knife. Tom and I were at a breaking point over my career and our lifestyle. I loved him, deeply, so I made a choice that I thought could smooth things over. I went to my boss and laid it out. I was quitting to be a full-time housewife. My boss was shocked, disappointed even. He knew how much my career meant to me. But then he offered a lifeline, remote work. I could still edit, only from home. It wasn't ideal, but it felt like a compromise I could live with without completely losing myself. I didn't tell Tom about the remote work arrangement. Instead, I told him I had quit my job to focus on our home. His face lit up in a way that both warmed and broke my heart. That's great, Jen. It'll be better for us, you'll see, he said, pulling me into a hug that felt like he was clinging to a newfound peace of mind. I threw myself into the role of housewife, handling the chores, cooking meals, and making sure everything was just right for when he came home from work. But as soon as he left for work each morning, my laptop opened, and I was back at my editor's desk, remotely. The balance was precarious, juggling my secret work life with the domestic life Tom believed I had embraced. I funneled the money I earned into a separate account. It seemed smarter to have a financial cushion that Tom didn't know about, just in case. Living on just Tom's salary was his idea, and it strained our finances more than he realized. Just 3 months in, the cracks began to show. We're running low on everything, Tom. We need to rethink our budget. I approached the topic one evening, hoping for a rational conversation. What are you talking about? You're just not managing our money right. You need to cut back on spending. He snapped back, frustration lacing his words. His words stung. I hadn't bought anything for myself in ages, always hunting for deals and scrimping wherever I could. I've been as frugal as possible. It's not enough, I insisted, my voice tight with hurt. The next day, as if on cue, Mrs. Harper showed up at our door. Tom told me you're having trouble with the budget. Let me show you how to shop properly, she declared, her tone brooking no argument. The following days were a crash course in extreme penny pinching. She dragged me to the store, pointing out the cheapest items, many of which were of questionable quality. These are what you should be buying, Jenna. None of that fancy stuff, she instructed, her voice harsh as if I was a wayward child. She even showed me how to dilute dish soap to make it last longer, her eyes sharp. You'll learn to make do with less. It's good for you, she said, nodding to herself more than to me. Every receipt was scrutinized, every expenditure questioned. Why did you buy this? You don't need to be traveling around when there's work to be done here, she scolded when she saw a bus ticket stub. It was more than just saving money, it felt demeaning, like I was under constant surveillance. Living this way, under the strict rules dictated by Tom and enforced by his mother, was stifling. One afternoon, I locked myself in the bedroom and called my mom. Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. I started, my voice cracking a bit as I explained how Mrs. Harper had been teaching me to stretch every dollar to the extreme, making me feel like I was living in the Great Depression. That's not normal, Jenna, my mom said firmly. You're supposed to be partners. It sounds like she's trying to control everything. And Tom should not be letting this happen. I sighed, feeling a small wave of relief just hearing her say it. I know, Mom. It's just so hard. I try to stand up for myself, but it always turns into a huge fight. Just as I was about to say more, the bedroom door swung open. Tom stood there, his face twisted in anger. He had overheard me. Without a word, he marched over, grabbed the phone from my hand, and ended the call. A wife shouldn't be complaining about her husband and mother-in-law like some kind of traitor, he snapped, his voice cold and harsh. I was stunned. Tom, I was talking to my mom. I needed someone to talk to. That doesn't give you the right to badmouth us. Especially not to your mother, he retorted, his eyes narrowing. The argument spiraled from there, voices raised, words that couldn't be taken back. In a huff, Tom stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He was gone for the rest of the day, leaving me alone with my thoughts, which were a tangled mess of sadness and frustration. It was well past midnight when I heard the key turn in the lock. Tom stumbled in, reeking of alcohol. His usual stern demeanor was replaced by a sloppy, cruel drunkenness. I should have listened to my mom. She warned me about marrying someone like you. He slurred, his words like daggers. I stood up, my own anger rising. Tom, you're a grown man. Stop letting your mother run our lives. You don't need her approval for every little thing. That seemed to set him off even more. If you're so unhappy, why don't you just leave? He yelled, stepping close, his voice booming in the confined space of our apartment. It's 3 a.m., Tom. It's not safe, I replied, trying to reason with him, even as my voice shook. I don't care. Get out, he shouted, not even looking at me. I hesitated only for a moment before I started to pack the essentials, my phone, some clothes. When I went to grab my wallet, Tom snatched it from my hands. I earned this money, Jenna. You have no right to it, he said, venom in his tone. Panic surged through me, but then I remembered my own account, my secret safety net. I called a taxi and left without looking back, Tom's angry shouts fading behind me as I closed the door. I found a temporary shelter in a nearby hotel. The morning after leaving Tom, I was up early, my mind racing with all that needed to be done. The first stop was a lawyer's office. It was a small, unassuming place, but the lawyer, Mr. Edwards, was sharp and kind. He listened as I laid out everything that had happened, nodding in understanding. We'll get the divorce papers drawn up right away. You have rights, Jenna, and we'll make sure you're protected, Mr. Edwards assured me, his voice firm and confident. Armed with my newly drafted divorce papers, I returned to the apartment where Tom and I had lived. The place was silent, the remnants of last night's chaos evident in the strewn bottles and Tom's snoring form on the couch. He hadn't even made it to the bedroom. I began packing my things quickly, stuffing clothes, books, and personal items into boxes and bags. The reality of leaving this chapter behind felt both liberating and heavy. As I zipped up the last suitcase, Tom stirred on the couch. "Jenna? Hey, can you grab me a beer?" he mumbled, still half asleep, not even noticing the suitcases. Instead of a beer, I placed the divorce papers on the coffee table in front of him. "Here's what I can give you," I said, my voice steady. Tom blinked, slowly coming to. He picked up the papers, scanning them, a smirk appearing on his face. "What's this? You're serious? Come on, Jen. You'll come back. Just say sorry to me and my mom, promise to follow the rules, and we can forget all this." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, bitter sound. "No, Tom. I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever. This is goodbye." I left the apartment, the door closing behind me with a click that sounded like the locking of my past. I moved into a rented apartment that afternoon, a small place, but mine alone. Returning to work full-time at the office felt like stepping back into a world where I was in control. The familiar buzz of the office, the clack of keyboards, and the scent of coffee brewing, everything reminded me why I loved my job. I also reconnected with my friends and my parents, rebuilding the bridges that had been strained during my turbulent marriage. Catching up over long dinners and weekend brunches, I shared laughs and stories, feeling the strength of these relationships that had weathered so much. One late afternoon, as I was wrapping up a manuscript, my phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, I saw a name I hadn't expected, Claire, a close friend from the city who had been my sounding board through the worst of times. "Hey Claire, what's up?" I answered, smiling as I heard her enthusiastic voice. "Jenna, I'm so glad I caught you. Listen, a few of us are getting together this weekend at that new cafe downtown. You have to come. It's been ages, and everyone's dying to see you." The cafe meetup turned out to be just what I needed. Laughter, updates, and a gentle nudge back into the social world. It felt good to be among friends, to share stories and listen to theirs, feeling the camaraderie that I'd missed. As the gathering wound down, Claire caught me by the arm as we were leaving. "Hey, how are you really doing, Jen?" she asked, her gaze piercing, but kind. I took a deep breath, letting the truth surface. "I'm getting there, Claire. It's been tough, but I think I'm finally moving forward for real." A few months into my new old life, my phone rang while I was reviewing a particularly challenging manuscript. The screen flashed Tom's name. Taking a deep breath, I answered, my voice cool and collected. "Jenna, hey, I need to talk to you." Tom's voice came through, hesitant and a bit desperate. "What is it, Tom?" I asked, not really in the mood for pleasantries. "Well, I got fired," he blurted out. "And things are tight. I was wondering." "You need money." I finished for him, not surprised by the turn of the conversation. "Yeah. And, well, I was thinking maybe we could start over, you know? If you apologize to my mom and me, and we could try again, you could take care of us." His voice was hopeful, almost pleading. I couldn't help it, I burst into laughter. The idea was so ludicrous it took me a moment to gather myself. "Tom, you're joking, right? You want me to apologize, support you, and come back to all that mess? You've ditched your principles pretty fast, haven't you?" There was a silence on the other end. "So, is that a no?" "Yes, Tom, that's a no. A big one," I replied, still chuckling at the absurdity. "I'm doing well, really well actually, and I'm not about to give up my freedom and happiness for another round of whatever that was." Hanging up, I shook my head in disbelief. The call was a stark reminder of how far I had come and how much I had changed. I was free, truly free, and it felt liberating. I turned back to my manuscript, a smile playing on my lips. The idea of jumping back into a relationship wasn't appealing at the moment. I was enjoying my independence too much, savoring the peace that came with it.